What up, guys? Welcome back to another chill session. It is a Thursday evening in good old Sydney, Australia, and here we are just chilling, relaxing to another 4K lo-fi hip-hop beats by Lo-Fi Geek. So tunes brought to you by Lo-Fi Geek, just chilling out. Just wanting to make a video and talking about an interesting topic that I've been reading about and been advertising to anyone that would listen to me at work. I think I sound like a broken record because I've been kind of sending people articles and telling people about this new global trend that's sweeping the nation, and it's the topic of quiet quitting. Now, some of you may not have heard about this thing, quiet quitting. What does it all mean? Well, today we're going to delve into it. We're going to look at what people are talking about, why it's taking TikTok by storm, social media by storm, and just what are people's opinions on this whole idea of kind of doing what's necessary. Some people may say it's the bare minimum, but it depends on your perspective. But it's the idea of just doing what is required, your job description, what is necessary to maintain relative order and do your job without taking on too much, finding that balance between work and life, and kind of trying to break the mentality that we're constantly in this hamster wheel trying to compete with everybody at the expense of a good work-life balance. Okay, so let me just read an article about that because, like I said, this has kind of been a topic that's, I don't know, I've been thinking about it a lot, and I think you think about it more so when you're really not in a good place or not happy with your job in particular. This light is really, really white. We need to soften that. Okay, so let's talk about quiet quitting. Doing the bare minimum at work has gone global, so we're going to zoom in so you guys can read it as well. Bartleby is back, although no doubt he would prefer not to be. This time, Herman Melville's reluctant Wall Street scrivener has returned in the form of TikTokers who have embraced quiet quitting. Okay, rather than working late on Friday evening organizing the annual team building trip to Slough, or volunteering to supervise the boss's teenager on work experience, the quiet quitters are avoiding the above and beyond, the hustle culture mentality, or what psychologists called occupational citizenship behaviors. So this is the first time I'm reading this article, by the way. I thought I'd find something simple to sum it up for you guys. Instead, they're doing just enough in the office to keep up, then leaving work on time and muting Slack, then posting about it on social media. Maria Kordowicz, an associate professor in organizational behavior at the University of Nottingham and director of its Centre for Interprofessional Education Learning, said the rise in quiet quitting is linked to a noticeable fall in job satisfaction. And hasn't that been the case since COVID-19 and the lockdowns and everything else? Like, people have lost their job, people have been forced to work at home, forced to work flexibly, remote, and it's dawned on them that I've been busting my ass all this time for a job that a lot of people don't particularly like. Some people are lucky enough to love their job, and that's great, but a lot of people are busting their ass to do a job that they don't like without the flexibility. COVID came along, forced everyone to work remotely or work flexibly or work in a way that has allowed them to spend more time at home, be with family, kind of hit the reset button on their life so they can realize what's more important to them. And it's not just working 9 to 6, 9 to 7. Everyone realistically is working more than their 9 to 5. All right, because in a world where technology has allowed us to constantly be online, on call, you're always at work. Okay, whether you want to believe it or not. You can say, "Oh, I leave my work phone at work and I don't take it home with me. I leave my laptop at work and I don't take it." Like, you are constantly connected somehow to your work. And it's even not just a digital connection, because, Office 365 allows you to kind of log into your organization's emails, like Microsoft Teams. It allows you to have it on your phone, your personal phone. But it's not just that kind of connection. It's also the mental connection. Like, you are mentally connected to your work, and it's hard to switch off. Everyone talks about how important it is to be able to switch off, right? But the reality is it's hard. Like, I had a chat with my manager, and she was just talking about, you should try and not have emails on your phone. You should try to leave your laptop at work. Don't log on, because cortisol, the stress hormone, is really bad for your health. Like, we know this. Like, research has shown, demonstrated, and proven that heightened levels of cortisol have long-lasting negative adverse health effects. Right? We know this. But what I told her was, sure, I mean, I agree that we don't want heightened levels of cortisol, but the reality is, if I don't drip feed my cortisol levels, like if I don't make sure tasks are on time and, I log in onto my phone every so often, then when I get back to work, instead of having small drip feeds of cortisol, I have a massive dump, right? I have a massive dump because you come back to like just inundated work. So the reality is, even though people encourage you to have this work-life balance, it's important to de-stress, unwind, find a hobby, do something that's good for your mental health. Yeah, but when you get back to work, the cortisol is still there, and it's a huge rush. It's not just a little drip droplet here and there. It's just an overwhelming surge of cortisol because you open up your email, and instead of having, 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, you have like massive amounts. Okay, and that's what I was kind of discussing with her when it comes to work-life balance. But anyway, so Gallup's Global Workplace Report for 2022 showed that only 9% of workers in the UK were engaged or enthusiastic about their work, ranking 33rd out of 38 European countries. Oh my God, that is so bad. 9% of workers in the UK were engaged or enthusiastic. And again, this goes to the whole notion that an engaged workforce is a productive workforce, right? Just think about all the people that are disenfranchised, disenchanted with the work that they do. When you're disenchanted with the work that you do, how good do you think you will be in other aspects of your life, right? You spend so many hours at work, and if you're disengaged with the work that you do, that is pervasive in other aspects of your life as well. That kind of seeps into other aspects of your life. The NHS staff survey conducted in the autumn of 2021 showed that the morale had fallen from 6.1 out of 10 to 5.8, and staff engagement had dropped from 7 to 6.8. Since the pandemic, people's relationship with work have been studied in many ways, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's huge literature and huge research done on how the pandemic has reshaped the way that not only people work, but how people perceive and understand and appreciate and look at work. And the quality of work that people do have become now more important than ever, because COVID-19 has done that for us. Typically across the professions would argue that yes, people's way of relating to the work has changed, Kordowitz said. TikTok posts about quiet quitting may have been inspired by Chinese social media Tang Ping, or lying flat. It is a now censored hashtag apparently prompted by China's shrinking workforce and long hours culture. Yes, Southeast Asia. The reason why there's massive manufacturing in Southeast Asian countries is not just because of the cheap labor. It's because of the slave labor culture, right? You're given horrendous conditions, you're paid measly, and the kind of submissive Asian cultural mentality is like these guys will just get on with the work and do the job as that's required of them. Okay, they're not rebellious in that type, and that's the difference between a lot of Western cultures and a lot of Southeastern or Eastern Asian cultures. Like, they're not submissive in a bad way. They're just compliant. So they kind of put in the long hours and they kind of deal with it. So Kordowitz added that the search for meaning has become far more apparent. There was a sense of our own mortality during the pandemic, something quite existential around people thinking, what should work mean for me? How can I do a role that's more aligned to my values? That is such a good point. And I guess in a way, We all realize that, right? When the pandemic first hit and the media was scaremongering everyone and it was just talking about everyone could drop dead any moment, a quarter of the world's population could disappear, your own mortality became something that was very real, right? And then when you take a moment to reflect on your life and what you're doing, you think, if I could die any moment because of the pandemic, what have I done? Or what have I been doing for the past couple of years? You know, what have I been doing in that? Have I been working in a job that has provided me with some sense of satisfaction, some alignment to the values that, you know, I value? And I think a lot of people have reflected upon that and realized, why am I putting so much effort, so many hours, so much focus and attention into something that I don't particularly enjoy? And then that feeling is compounded because when you reflect back to all those times that you've been hard done by, you know, all that work that you've done, and then Mark from the other team got all the credit, or your manager got all the credit, or, you know, you see people in your office doing less than you but still getting paid the same recognition, less recognition, people that you feel have unjustly managed to get a position above you, or whatever reason. So all these emotions, all these memories, and all these experiences come flooding back to you, and then quiet quitting takes his wings and takes flight. So I think there is a link to the elements of quiet quitting that are perhaps more negative: mentally checking out from a job, being exhausted from the volume of work, and lack of work-life balance that hit many of us during the pandemic. And I completely agree with that. It's not just the fact that you're doing something that doesn't align to your values, that doesn't give you a job satisfaction, but it's also being exhausted. The sheer amount of work that a lot of people do, they lose sight of the fact that there's burnout, right? When you're taking on project after project after project, there is inevitably going to be some form of burnout, and you lose sight of what work-life balance really means. And I feel like a lot of jobs or departments, or, you know, institutions or workplaces kind of fly the flag that work-life balance is an important thing, but at the end of the day, it's operational needs before anything else, right? It's, you know, they pretend, but whether they wholeheartedly kind of embrace the whole work-life balance is questionable. But I think that can lead to less satisfaction at work, lack of enthusiasm, less engagement. So we could juxtapose quiet quitting with the great resignation. Do we stay put but switch off, or do we move towards something? The term Great Resignation was coined in May 2021 by Anthony Klotz, an associate professor of management at University of College London, when he predicted an exodus of American workers from their jobs prompted by the burnout and taste of freedom while working from home. And this is still pervasive, because I don't understand why, you know, people are still expected to return back to work when the pandemic has allowed them to show that they can work, you know, at home, work remotely. For example, you know, my wife, she has some flexible working arrangement. It has become more flexible since COVID, but the reality is it has shown that she could do her job just as well if given the flexibility, right? But still, apparently, they're expecting people to slowly come back into work, and I imagine at some point in time, ideally, they'd want to have people on the work campus full time. But why? You know, granted, she does say that sometimes she enjoys going into work for the social aspect, and perhaps she feels mentally that she's a bit more productive. But at the end of the day, the work still gets done, and she does it to a very high level. She's been recognized for that. So I don't understand why a lot of institutions still hold on to that old school mentality that people need to be in the office, and it feels just like it's just a trust issue. So Ranjay Gulati of Harvard Business School has instead characterized it as a great rethink where people evaluate their lives and options. People like Natalie Ormond. I left my 14-year social work career last September, she said. I wasn't driven to climb the ladder and I felt that I was coasting, not doing the bare minimum, but was just doing my job and not going above and beyond. Ormond decided to set up her own business, Morekind, selling eco-friendly children's toys and clothing, and kept a day job to build her savings. Towards the end, I felt that I'd mentally checked out, which came with some guilt. She was concerned about the people she was supporting as a social worker, so left earlier than she had planned. So this is important, right? It's very important. Because a lot of people, like I said when I started the video, that the old school people will be like, you're just lazy, you know? The boomers, they'll be like, you know, the new millenniums, the Gen Zs and whatever. You guys are just lazy. You don't know what hard work is. Back in my day, I had to... Okay, we get it, Grandpa. We understand back in your day you worked hard. Well, guess what? Back in your day, you didn't have the technology to allow you to work smart, okay? A lot of people just want to work intelligently. They don't want to work harder. They want to work smarter. And technology has allowed them to work smarter. Technology has allowed them to work remotely. Doesn't mean they're lazy. Technology has allowed them to be digital nomads. Okay, doesn't mean they're lazy. Just means they're able to do what they do in a location that's more desirable for them. And that's just the reality. Okay, so I think it's important what Ormond has said, that she, I think it's a she, Ranjay Gulati, no, where's Ormond? Anyway, this person realized that they were mentally checking out, and because they were a social worker, it was probably potentially really unfair of them to continue to do the job while they knew that mentally they had checked out, and that in itself came with some guilt. And I can kind of relate to that. I'll be honest with you. I can kind of relate to that. When you do something that you really dislike and you don't find a sense of satisfaction in your job, then you check out. And you know, I don't think people need to feel guilty about this so much, because that's the reality of work and being human. Okay, a lot of us are doing work that we're not particularly happy with. We're doing work that just pays the bills. We're turning up every day, doing what's necessary. Some of us doing what's less than necessary, and we're collecting the paychecks because we have a mortgage, we have bills, we have children, we have family, we have whatever it is, we have expenses. Okay. The bad thing is when you know everyone is on the same level, but not doing the same level of work. That's when the conflict becomes very real, and it creates that disengaged workforce. And I'm talking about someone who works in the public service, because everyone in public service gets paid the same, right? We're on this kind of payment range and we do the same job. But as you can appreciate, and I think everyone's experienced this, that despite people doing the same job, having the same job description, having the same job title, we each have different skills, we have different strengths and developmental areas. So a lot of people shine more than others. And this idea of quiet quitting gets polarized, gets embedded even deeper, and people become even more jaded when they're just like, we're all collecting the same paycheck, man. Why am I working harder? Do I need to take on more extra projects? When the manager taps you on the shoulder and says, hey, Dave, can you do this for me? I was like, well, I can do it, but I don't really want to do it. Why don't you ask Peter over there? Why don't you ask Fred? Why don't you ask, whatever. So that's where I am at the moment with this whole kind of idea of quiet quitting. I find it very confronting because it's real. I find it confronting because it's real. It's not just a ethereal concept that's out there and people just talking about it and thinking about it. No, people have been doing this since the dawn of time, really. It's only getting traction now, but we've always known that one person that doesn't pull the same weight. And it goes back to like school days when you get like group work and a group project, right? The majority of you'd always want to group up with the smart kid or something like that, because the smart kid will do all the work and you wouldn't do half as much, and because it's a group project, you get kind of like marked together. So even as like little children, like this idea is there, it's embedded in their mind. But quiet quitting, I guess, is more so about the individual. It's about how you feel about your job and how much effort do you feel like you need to put into your job. Okay. Others have reached their ambition and realized that it wasn't what they were looking for. Amy Jones began her career in marketing and became head of communications at a not-for-profit in 2017. "It was my dream job," she said. "It sounds strange saying that now, but I wanted that position, the status, the salary. I was up for giving it a real go." She continued to take phone calls at weekends, on holidays, at 10:30 p.m. at night, turning up early and leaving late to keep up with colleagues. Again, comparison is the thief of joy, people. Okay? When you're trying to keep up with the Joneses, taking phone calls on weekends while on holidays at 10:30 in the evening, turning up early, what? You got to question, what are you doing this for? You doing this to get your dream job? Sometimes when you reach the mountaintop, you realize it's very lonely being up there. "It was all driven by me," she said, until her best friend from university told her she was dropping to 3 days a week. "It's terrible, but I was a bit judgy about it," Jones said. "We were meant to be climbing the corporate ladder together, but she said my busyness doesn't equal my worth, and it blew my mind." Within 18 months, Jones had quit to start her Kind Kids book club business. There's so many facts and so many kind of moments in this article that kind of brings you back to reality, right? Like that again, my busyness doesn't equal my worth. It's like when you go to work and you bust your balls to achieve whatever it is that you achieve, like you put in extra hours, you're busier than the other guy, but it doesn't equate how much you're worth, right? If you work in private, you might get a pay rise here and there, but is it really, when you look back and really reflect on it, do you really feel like taking those calls in the evening, logging into your work in the afternoons, outside of work, taking time away from your family or from social events? Do you really feel that it equals your worth or what the business sees you as being worth? Perhaps quiet quitting has been brewing for a while. After all, Melville dreamt up Bartleby in 1853, and even the Bible says God needed a break on the seventh day. More recently, tech firms have capitalized on the reaction against the 1980s Gordon Gekko-inspired long hours culture by creating more casual working environments with brightly colored office, free food and drink, and corporate swag wrapped up in the rhetoric of mission and purpose. Yet, that can hide other problems. Dan Lyons, a former tech journalist, lampooned his brief period working for HubSpot, which called itself an inbound marketing company creating valuable content, by which Lyons described as a digital sweatshop. Wow. In his book, Disrupted. If you're committed to your career and feel an emotional bond with the organization or the career, then if an event happens that violates the psychological contract, the unwritten expectations that abuses our sense of whether we can trust the organization. Really interesting. I want to read another one. Surprising origin of quiet quitting. Let's just watch some TikTok videos.
I recently learned about this term called quiet quitting, where you're not outright quitting your job, but you're quitting the idea of going above and beyond. You're still performing your duties, but you're no longer subscribing to the hustle culture mentality that work has to be your life. The reality is it's not, and your worth as a person is not defined by your labor.
Workers all over the world are jumping on the new quiet quitting trend to fight back against their demanding jobs, but the origin of the movement was probably come as a surprise to many. Quiet quitting is essentially a rejection of the idea that work has to take over your life, and that you, as an employee, should be going above and beyond in your role. Keyword is going above and beyond. Okay, it doesn't say be lazy. It doesn't say do the bare minimum. It doesn't say do less work at the expense of your colleagues so they have to pick up your slack. Because if everyone did this, everyone would just be considered doing your job, right? But because society has built up this idea that you need to do more, you need to hustle, you need to grind, you need to do bigger, you need to do better, you need to compare yourself to that guy, because status is a thing. You know, like, we're not saying you need to be lazy. We're just saying you need to do your job well enough. You don't need to do it be so absorbed in it that you sacrifice other parts of your life. That's what they're saying. Instead, people are now reverting to only performing the duties outlined in the job description and politely deciding to take on and politely declining to take on more responsibilities outside of their work life, God, I can't read today. Instead, people are now reverting to only performing the duties outlined in their job description and politely declining to take on any more responsibilities outside of that or work longer hours than necessary. Now it appears the concept has its origin in China, like all these people. Let's watch this.
What did y'all do?
This is the first time I've ever really been published, and it's sinking in for me that the content that you put out on the internet can be reported on. I'm so honored that so many of you have related to my video. I feel like I need to say for legal purposes, it says here that I'm quiet quitting my job. I never said I quiet quit my job. Welcome to the circus.
Alright. A new wave of young workers are rebelling against the concept of long and arduous work hours in China, with the lying flat concept gaining extreme popularity throughout 2021. The trend jump-started in April 21 when an online post about the concept went viral, with the author poking holes in the old mindset that work must be your life. The movement gained so much attention that the CCP-run newspaper, the Guangming Daily, published commentary pushing back against it. The creative contribution of our youth is indispensable to achieving the goal of high-quality development. China University of Labor Relations official Wang Xingyu was quoted as saying, "Attending to those lying flat and giving them the will to struggle is a prime necessity for our country as it faces the task of transitional development." See, there's a big difference between lying flat and just doing what's needed, still doing a job. I think lying flat is kind of like a derogatory term of just people wanting to be lazy and not actually working. All right, we still need people to innovate and do what's necessary to keep society going. We just don't want to do it at the expense of everything else. In fact, the ruling party became so worked up about the trend that President Xi Jinping issued an explicit warning to young okay. Is he the president, prime minister? I don't know. He issued a warning.
Some of you are saying that there are better terms than quiet quitting to use to encapsulate the movement. That would have been nice to know before I made a viral video about it. Anyway, some of you brought up boundary setting, meeting expectations, work to rule. Apparently in China, there's this lying flat movement. I'd never heard about this movement, but here's a really fascinating BBC article on it. This man's quote is iconic. "I'm continuing to get rid of the negative energy in my life. I don't want to do anything. I will continue to lie flat." What a legend.
A happy life is achieved through struggle, and common prosperity depends on work and wisdom, hard work and wisdom. It is necessary to prevent the solidification of social strata, smooth upward flow channels, create opportunities for more people to become rich. Okay, the conspiracy theorist in me is just like, okay, what? So the smooth upward flow channels, creation of opportunities for more people to become rich from development environment. Like, they just want people to get back to work, man. You know what I mean? Like, they tried the whole pandemic thing, the whole shutdown thing, this test to see how compliant people would be, and they realized people would be compliant. However, there are drawbacks. People now have realized and woken up and found that there's much more to offer in their life than just grinding away at work. Okay? So, in trying to play out their little experiment, the elite power puppeteers have now realized that, yeah, people will comply, but there are side effects to that as well. Okay? Despite this, many young Chinese people have stuck with the trend, with one person telling the BBC he won't be stopping anytime soon. The man, named only as Jeff, told the outlet work became his life after taking a job as a highly paid app developer in Beijing, leaving him unable to have any kind of meaningful social life outside of work. When COVID-19 hit, Jeff finally found time to reassess his priorities, taking leave for travel and eventually quitting his job and finding a new, less demanding role. Now, the reality is, how many of you, realistically, once the pandemic hit and were forced to work from home, just had a real big sigh of relief? You know, apart from all the parents that had to like homeschool and found that just horrendous. Like the people that were grinding away at their job, trying to climb the corporate ladder, and then boom, all of a sudden, you know, people lost their jobs. The unemployment queue was all the way up the street and around the corner. And you just reassessed your life and you thought, is this it? Every day I go to work and then a pandemic hits and everything shuts down, and now I get to kind of sit back, reflect, hit the reset button and re-energize. And it feels great. All my hobbies that I discovered during my lying down time, skiing, rock climbing, I'll be able to keep doing them all. I have time to do what I love. I'm very satisfied, he told the outlet. I'm continuing to get rid of the negative energy in my life. I think 2022 will be an upgrade on 2021, but I still don't want to do anything. I will continue to lie flat. I enjoy this state. Australians are embracing the quiet quitting trend. In recent viral TikTok about the movement sparked a lively discussion on a Brisbane Reddit thread where many users explained they have adopted this method with a lot of success. I stepped down from a management position to a lower one with less hours to study, one user said. Went from putting in 110% into everything I did to the absolute bare minimum required to keep me happy and employed. Another user, a nurse, said that they had definitely dialed down their time spent at work after having to take time off due to burnout and family issues. Since I've been back, I only work 2 to 3 shifts a week. I do what my job needs me to do, they wrote. My work ethic is still strong, but I no longer put my hand up for every other shift, and I say no to some that are asked of me. So this is like, when there's overtime available at work, I never do it. And this is before quiet, this is before pandemic. Because you have to really assess what's important in your life. To me, family has always been important. That was my top priority. And I will never do, weekend work or evening work or whatever overtime work that takes away from my family life. That's kind of my one rule. I don't want to, and I'll never let it. No amount of money can be worth you and your time with your family and your kids and your loved one. Okay, so I do stay for emergency after hours, but I won't always be the one to do it. I absolutely don't want extra responsibility anymore. There are others to do that. Another person said they've been doing this for years, while one person said they adopted this method earlier this year and have since found life is more enjoyable and felt less stress. Others pointed out that this wasn't a new concept, claiming it was nothing more than healthy boundaries and having a work-life balance, something any decent company should ensure exists. One person claimed that quiet quitting movement seemed to be more prevalent in Brisbane compared to other major cities. Having worked up and down the East Coast, Brisbane is already quiet quitting compared to Melbourne, Sydney, they wrote. What I am noticing is that professional career paths are heading towards more rewarding creative jobs with less stress. In other words, let the ambitious one push for stressful positions. And like, if you're one of those people that want to embrace quiet quitting, that's fine. Don't whinge and moan when those that put in the effort, put in the hard work, put in the time, get ahead of you. Okay? Like, you have to accept that as well. You have to accept that part if you're wanting this part. Where there is a disconnect, for me though, is when you see other people that you feel don't deserve it, are not as good as you, don't put in the time, don't put in effort, they get ahead of you and they get more money. That's where the discrepancy is, and that's when people become even more disenchanted, disengaged. But that aside, look, I am 100% more for the quiet quitting concept. I don't like that term so much. I agree with that other video. Maybe like healthy boundaries is more the right kind of word to use, but essentially I think moving forward you will see that people will wake up, come to realize that putting in the extra hours, picking up those extra projects, going the extra 50, 100%, you know, is really not worth the payback, the payoff. And I guess it depends on what is important. And maybe I'm just saying this because I'm at a stage in my life where I'm kind of like, you know, I'm 38 now, so it's like I'm nearing closer to a point where I wouldn't say peaked, but it's like you're really ambitious and you're chasing things more so in your 20s and 30s. But as you end and go into your 40s, you're just looking for work-life balance and job satisfaction. Anyway, I just ranted. I literally ranted for like nearly 40 minutes about this concept. I'm trying to implement it more in my life. I'll tell you that much. I'm trying to implement more of this idea where we don't work so hard so we burn ourselves out. There you go. So with that said, guys, always a pleasure. And I'll see you in the next video. Bye.